Good afternoon, folks. I feel small up here behind this giant lectern, so hopefully you can all see me. This is the session, Turning the Infrastructure Inside Out and IT Practices Upside Down, Cloud Adoption in Microsoft IT. My name is David Leff. I'm an architect in Microsoft IT. Been with the company now for a little over 16 years, most of it in the server and systems manageability space. About 18 months ago, I decided to move over into the networking space. There's a lot of opportunity around cloud networking. Everything's going software defined. There was a lot of cool things that I can do in that space, and that's where the focus of my work has been. But I've been involved for the past few years in developing our cloud strategy and then defining a lot of the tactical execution that happens to actually move an enterprise as large as Microsoft to our own cloud services, and then employ partner technologies as well to supplement what Microsoft provides as platforms. I don't have any whiz-bang demos. You saw tons of those during the keynote. I was actually very excited about what I saw. Some of those things were new to me even. But a lot of them I was very familiar with, but I was happy to see them working, for the most part, pretty flawlessly. So great time, very exciting. Hope you'll get a lot out of this session. Hopefully toward the end we'll have plenty of time for questions. I'll be hanging around. But then also I'll be involved in the IT Showcase booth at the Expo, so come please visit us there. I do have some very cool gifts that the Showcase people were kind enough to provide, people that ask really outstanding, insightful questions. These are travel chargers, and then the Office 365 track were kind enough to give me some shirts. So you guys will get some swag out of this, among other things. I'll talk a little bit about how we view cloud, kind of give you an orientation around how we view it in Microsoft IT. If you ask 10 people what cloud is, you're going to get 10 different answers. So we're trying to stick with industry standard definitions, but we have our own kind of flavor on, how we view the different technologies that Microsoft provides and where they fit in. I'll tell you about our history and our early cloud efforts. We made plenty of mistakes. We learned from them, and that resulted in that revised IT cloud strategy and our new approach. I'll talk a bit about the influences and challenges we still face in the infrastructure space. So I'm an infrastructure guy, though I know plenty about the application side. It's my challenge to help the application folks get there. So I have to lay the foundation. And laying that foundation is a task in and of itself. I'll talk a bit about the changing IT philosophy and investments, how we're fundamentally changing what we do inside of IT, where we're spending our money, where we're spending our time, where we're spending our effort to get to the cloud efficiently, quickly, and actually realize the benefits, and then some additional insights and learnings. At the very end, prior to questions also, I'll point you to some additional resources. There's a lot of great sessions here that kind of build upon what I'm going to be talking about and get a bit deeper, quite a bit deeper actually. So what is the cloud? We like the NIST definition. So if you look at the NIST definition, it's pretty concise. There's actually a very nice document behind it, but it's a model for on-demand shared resources such as networks, servers, storage, what have you, that can be rapidly provisioned with minimal management effort, and the 5 essential characteristics, which you'll see here. On-demand self-service, so you can deliver capacity in seconds, minutes, hours, through a web interface, typically. Broad network access. Let me just go ahead and build this out so we don't have to keep watching the thing slide in. But you can get to it from anywhere, essentially, from the internet, from any device you choose to use. Resources are pooled, so they're not allocated to any one company, any one application. In a multi-tenant environment, typically with the public cloud services, they can be delivered to, it says 1,000, potentially hundreds of thousands, millions of customers. So you heard the figure in the keynote that we have over 1 million servers providing our cloud infrastructure. Million servers times 10, 20, 50, 100 tenants at any one period of time. Pretty large customer set. Elasticity is a very important one. So the ability to consume what you need when you need it, and then be able to give it back when you don't need it. So that's a foreign concept to a lot of enterprise IT organizations that bought hardware, and if they weren't using it, it sat there idle. So we made that mistake as well. And the measured service kind of goes with that. So pay for what you're using, and then give it back. Some other tenant that's occupying that multi-tenant infrastructure can use it if you're not using it. So again, pretty straightforward. I think a lot of people coming in Microsoft IT, but then other enterprise organizations that I've talked to didn't tie all 5 of these together, and they just thought that virtualization was cloud, or going to some kind of shared hosted infrastructure was being cloud. They didn't really look at all 5 of these things and tie them together to get the potential maximum benefit of cloud. They picked on individual things, and to me that really doesn't make for a true cloud. The bottom there's a hyperlink that actually links to the full document on there. If you haven't read that, I'd highly encourage you to go out and read that. This is kind of the basis of how we think about cloud services themselves. So if you look at Microsoft's portfolio, so you kind of got a taste of this earlier today, but at the bottom, starting from the bottom, we have our private cloud infrastructure. So Windows Server 2012, Microsoft Hyper-V Server, add Azure Stack to that now. So kind of fits into that private cloud. Azure Stack was something that I unfortunately couldn't put on this slide, but it was just disclosed about an hour or so ago. It's something we've been waiting for years. We have the Windows or Microsoft Azure Pack deployed today in Microsoft IT. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that foundation for private cloud that brings it up to parity with not only infrastructure as a service in public Azure, but now we're climbing up the stack into platform as a service, and then the software as a service offerings that build on top of it. So the Microsoft Azure block on the right-hand side really represents that IaaS and PaaS set of services, fundamentally at the infrastructure layer. And then as you climb up again, when we're talking about PaaS, data services, and then application services. And then at the top, we have that finished services layer. So the things you just simply subscribe to and you plug into. You fire up a client, you connect to, and it's ready for your use. Office 365, Yammer, Dynamics, Windows Intune. Now we're going to have Windows Update for Business would fall into that category as well. Visual Studio Online, which is becoming increasingly important in Microsoft IT. We're now using that for workflow management, backlog management, resource planning even, along with Dynamics CRM. Basically, a lot of the work that we do that's very mechanical, that requires cross-group coordination, we're now doing in a single Microsoft IT-owned subscription in Visual Studio Online. And then if you choose to use the traditional tools on the left-hand side, Visual Studio and Microsoft System Center, they still work against the entirety of the stack. So you can choose from the online piece, or you can choose from the on-prem installed software piece as well. So again, this is kind of the cloud world that we live in. There's more to it. This is just a small picture. But this is the majority, or these are the key products that make up the Microsoft IT Enterprise cloud portfolio that we leverage. So our history and early cloud efforts. So I'll go ahead and build this out very quickly. I hate these crazy build slides. And it's not building. But anyway, we are a very large enterprise. But we're not the only IT shop within Microsoft. So we're dwarfed by the online space. So you heard 1 million servers that service our cloud efforts. The online space runs Azure. They run Office 365. They run what used to be Hotmail, Outlook.com. All those big web properties run in the online space. We also have a peer group inside of IT that runs the systems that support our engineering functions. So they support the product development and release functions inside of Microsoft. They do some specialized things. My group really represents the enterprise, running of the business internally, the internal services that Microsoft needs to, employ its people, give them productivity services, run the core infrastructure. That's what the enterprise is about. But even so, even though we're not the only IT organization there, we're still very, very large. So if you look at our physical server footprint, we're somewhere around 10,000 or so physical servers. Most of those are virtualization hosts. So we're very highly virtualized. Again, we have over 100,000 employees. You've probably seen some of these figures before. We're global, so we're in more than 500 sites worldwide. So we have very large concentrations of people like Microsoft headquarters, large concentrations in Asia and Europe, but we also have very small tail sites where there may be 5, 10 people, and we also have a lot of people that work from home. So as you can see, we have over, 80,000 or so consecutive remote connections. So we have a very mobile workforce. A lot of them very rarely or never come into the office. They work from home. So we have to be able to support their productivity from anywhere, again, on any device. So you'll see a lot of these things continue to crop up, not only in the products and services that Microsoft is providing, but then also in the life that we live on a daily basis. Kind of finishing this one out along the bottom, about 30% of our applications in our portfolio today are some sort of Azure Platform as a Service, not totally. So we have a lot of applications that are heterogeneous, that don't live cleanly in one service model, that may not live cleanly in one cloud. They're stretched hybrid. They're part public, part private. Some may even have dependencies that are not in the cloud. They're on traditional hardware still. Some span IaaS and PaaS. Some have on-prem components that actually integrate with things like Dynamics Online and Office 365. That's a pattern that we see that's very common in large enterprises that weren't born in the cloud, but they're migrating to the cloud. And they're migrating both intentionally and opportunistically. It's going to be a long road to the cloud, even for an organization that's as aggressive as Microsoft and Microsoft IT. So I think we're more aggressive than a lot of other enterprises that are there. They're just starting their journey. We've been on this journey now for about 5 years now, and we're really just getting going at a rapid pace. To kind of finish this one out, there are some interesting infrastructure things that are happening. If you look at the Microsoft infrastructure environment, every time we had a merger and acquisition, we bolted their Active Directory forest onto our existing forest with a cross-forest trust. Or, in some cases, we migrated the population into our identity environments, but more often than not, we just simply added another forest. We ended up with 11 AD forests that we run internally. So some of these are for business partner access. They're an extranet forest. Some are corporate. We have one for this company that we acquired a little while ago called Nokia that we've connected to our environments. We also have ones for test dev purposes. We have ones that are isolated to repro customer environments. But it's just one of those trends where, as we had different business needs, we just kept adding. We're changing that when we're going into the cloud. So we went from 11 AD forests to one single Azure Active Directory tenancy. So all of those AD forests, plus all the federations that we're having with business partners, they're all reflected in that single Azure Active Directory tenancy. So we're simplifying our administration, and some of the really cool things you saw during the keynote in terms of being able to get visibility into who's accessing what resource, we're going to be able to look in one spot now. Very, very powerful. And then to finish this one out, we are very, very heavy Office 365, SharePoint, and Lync users. We live and die by email, Instant Messenger, and Lync, or now Skype for Business, on a daily basis. So, and most of that is actually in the cloud today. All right, now it's finally listening to me. All right. So, several years ago, we actually began down a road that led us to be in a pretty decent position for cloud migration today without even really knowing that there was such a thing as cloud. So way back when, in fiscal year 2008, which is calendar year 2007 for people that are not part of Microsoft, since we were about 6 months off, we went through an effort to actually look at our application portfolio and start to rationalize it. And that first part of that rationalization was looking for things that weren't being used or that had outright duplication with some other application. So we made a very heavy cut in that very first year and eliminated about 800 applications from our portfolio. They just simply weren't needed anymore, or there was another application that did that same business function better than it did. So we took a pretty good whack at the application portfolio there, and we've been driving it down ever since, to the point now where we're less than half of the numbers of applications that we had some 6 or 7 odd years ago. That combined with the trend of virtualizing machines, getting rid of people's physical machines, moving them into VMs on-prem first, and now moving them into Azure infrastructure as a service VMs, has put us into a fairly good position that it's easy for us to move the bulk of our portfolio now up to Azure. IaaS is the lowest common barrier pretty rapidly, but then also reducing the numbers of applications that we have there allowed us to get that percentage up to 30% Azure PaaS pretty rapidly because we just simply have less to less to migrate, modify, and move. This does give us an advantage in getting there faster to get to a quicker ROI, and then get some of those cloud advantages that I talked about: elasticity, rapid provisioning, efficient use of resources, all the great things you get from cloud. We started to set ourselves up from that, many, many years ago without actually really realizing it. But other enterprises that are going to the cloud today are actually doing the same thing. So just something that clicked in our head that made good sense to do anyway, but it's actually helping us move to the cloud faster now. We like to call this one the dirty laundry slide. So back before Azure was called Azure and Office 365 was called Office 365, we had these things called business online productivity services. We were actually adopting these and getting out of running our own private infrastructures. And, this thing that would become Azure was starting to emerge, and we're starting to plan to adopt it. At the time, Steve Ballmer was out telling us, we're all in, we're all into the cloud. Everybody's just naturally going to go. We made some over-optimistic assumptions on how easy it was going to be to get there and how fast we were going to get there. We didn't give people good guidance on how to get there. We didn't incent them to get there other than we're all in. We didn't build some of the underlying enablers to allow people to get there easily without rolling a lot of their own custom glue and making a lot of their own effort that ended up being redundant across applications. So you'll see these lines here, the original projection. Way back in 2009, 2010, we actually wrote a bunch of white papers, made a bunch of grand proclamations that said, in 5 years we'll be 80% in the cloud, public cloud. Well, when we started looking at the trend line in 2012, year and a half, 2 years later, we saw that the trend line, we were going to be nowhere near 80%. It was going to be more like 20%. We weren't getting to where we thought we should be, or we thought we had the capability to be. So we made a reset in the strategy. So we created a complete reset of the strategy right there in 2011, 2012. We got a bunch of smart people in a room. We sat down and said the old strategy had good intentions, but it really wasn't panning out. Right? We don't think the strategy was right. We don't think that simply going to IaaS and saying we're all done, we're cool, we're in the cloud, is the right approach. We think you should go higher up in the stack. We think that there are fundamental investments that need to be made around things like network connectivity, security, and that kind of thing to allow people to go without so much heavy lifting. We didn't enable the applications to go. We just simply assumed they were going to go and thought that was going to be enough. And we were proven wrong in a very apparent way. But this is not necessarily a bad thing. So recognizing that the old strategy wasn't working and that we had to create a new strategy and we had to actually put some teeth behind it and put some resources behind it was a good learning experience for us. This is an effort that I think is of a magnitude that we haven't seen in many, many years, but definitely prior to my getting into the field. So I came in 1998, 1999, when client and server was already well established. We had a couple mainframes sitting over in the corner running, AS400 and Xenix, but they were on their way out. This is a majorly disruptive thing, and it's not going to happen organically very fast at all. If you let this happen organically, it's going to take you 10, 20 years. People are going to sit back and unless it becomes brain dead simple, which it's becoming pretty easy to get to the cloud. We're making a lot of investments that make it simple for people to develop for the cloud and simple to migrate. But there's still a lot of complexity in it. I mean, you heard in the keynote that a lot of people are worried about security, and rightfully so. There are definitely some things that cause people pause and cause them to think about whether this is right for them. We are giving you options, but again, making it intentional, giving people the resources they need to get there is definitely a step in the right direction. So having a good strategy, having a good approach in terms of how you adopt that's sane, that gives you the operational security, integrity that you need to run your business on is absolutely essential. Otherwise, you're going to follow that bottom line that we chose not to follow. The obvious question here is, where are we actually today? I believe we're about 50%. So 30% of our applications, again, are on PaaS. We're moving very, very quickly to IaaS for the stuff that's not going to be modernized in the next couple of years. So IaaS, again, is kind of the lowest barrier to adoption. So for the things that we're not going to invest in the next 3 years to actually recode and modernize, where it's not going to die on the vine, it's okay for me to move it from on-prem to Azure IaaS and just simply get it out of my environment. And there's good reason we're doing that. So we're staring down the barrel right now of about a $200 million investment that we would have to make in on-prem data centers and hardware refresh that we don't want to make. So our old virtualization infrastructure right now has become end of warranty, or will be very shortly, and then a couple years after that will go end of life. I don't want to replace that infrastructure with more private single-tenant infrastructure. I don't want to have to retrofit the data center because the data center is aging, getting old. So I don't want to go into those facilities and make them Microsoft IT specific. I actually want to get rid of those, and I want to move my workloads up into public cloud. So I want to take advantage of IaaS where I need to take advantage of it, knowing that it might not be my final destination. I'm okay with that. I'll trade a little bit of time to avoid that $200-some million spend. It's a good business decision, and I'm okay with it technically. So, knowing that what we decided to do in 2009, 2010 wasn't really the right way to go, we came up with a new approach and a new architecture and strategy. This is very highly simplified, and it's going to continue to change and has continued to change. One of the versions that I created of this actually had the workload placement you see at the top in public cloud mirrored at the bottom, which seems to be borne out by the whole Azure Stack announcement that we heard today, where with the Windows Azure Pack or Microsoft Azure Pack, you had IaaS services running on Hyper-V that look like Azure and a little bit of PaaS in the form of websites. Now we're going to bring that entirety, that Azure Stack down to your private data center. So again, take that, flip it over and mirror it, make that efficiency go both directions, knowing that if you look at it from top right to bottom, we definitely prefer to go to public software as a service as our first choice. So if you can commoditize your workload, if you can deal with having your data in a commoditized service, that's your first choice. You're going to get the best efficiency there with the least amount of effort. If you can't go to a commoditized service, but you can modernize your application, PaaS is your choice. So any new application that's being developed that doesn't fit into Office 365, Dynamics Online, Visual Studio Online now is going to be developed for PaaS. So if it's specific to Microsoft's internal business purposes, it's PaaS. If it's not going to be modernized, so if you fall through those first two buckets, again, because we want to avoid that on-prem data center spend, IaaS is your choice. So for the things that you don't own the code, or that we're not going to get the investment to go in and refactor, IaaS is an acceptable choice at this point. If you cannot go to public cloud, and there are things that, for whatever reason, can't go to public cloud quite yet, we still have our on-prem private cloud that right now is running on Hyper-V with System Center and the Azure Pack, soon to be Azure System, running there, and that's your choice for workloads that must remain on premises. There is a very small minority of things that are staying on premises that won't run in virtual machines. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but the vast majority of on-prem servers, storage, and network that we still support in a data center or lab environment are going to be virtualization hosts with VMs running on top of them. There are some fundamental enablement areas, and these are a couple of the things that we missed, in addition to having intentional adoption work streams in the original strategy. We kind of ignored the fact that you need to have good network connectivity to the cloud, right? Put your application up in the cloud. If you don't have a good internet edge, if you don't have the proper investments in hybrid connectivity, you're not going to have a great application experience unless you take the entire application up into the cloud. And we have very few enterprise applications that are easily packaged up and put completely in the cloud. Most of them are hybrid, or most of them are sufficiently complex enough that just simply packaging them up as Azure PaaS and putting them up in the cloud just doesn't work for us. Security is another huge one. So we had a lot of people run for the cloud and then go, whoa, wait a minute. I don't understand how to secure my application never had to take care of its own security. It was behind a firewall. It was in a physically secured data center. I didn't have to think about, how I manage my own identity, which is number 4 there. I certainly didn't have to think about my manageability. If I put it on a supported data center server, some of those operations people just took care of it for me. They installed the config manager agent, they installed the operations manager agent, they put it in all the right groups. I didn't have to think about any of that kind of stuff. When we realized that and realized those were adoption inhibitors, we went back and started looking at what the cloud technology offered. And the things that we had done on premises didn't exactly translate to the cloud. Some didn't work at all. Some we didn't believe to be the right choice. So we created individual efforts around those 4 key things to build the connectivity, to deal with the security investments, manageability investments, and changes that we needed to make to the identity infrastructure and identity services to actually do the right thing for cloud and give the people that were either trying to migrate their applications or develop new applications for the cloud the right guidance, which is something we completely neglected in the original strategy. We also created these adoption work streams. So I talked about portfolio assessment, making sure that after we've actually scrubbed the portfolio that we were choosing the right applications. One of the things that will definitely impede your transition to the cloud is if you pick the wrong apps and there's a bad experience. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Data center rationalization, that was the making sure that we're moving the applications out of the data centers opportunistically to make sure that we're not over-investing in on-prem so we don't end up with a lifecycle issue there, and moving the right workloads up to public cloud to get the maximum benefit of cloud migration, modernizing the applications when we have the opportunity, and then legacy migration really goes hand in hand with that data center rationalization piece to make sure that we're taking the right applications to SaaS and PaaS. The ones that can't go to those models go to IaaS with the goal of limiting and eventually stopping and deprecating the on-prem data center investments that we've made over the past 40 years, I guess, in the history of Microsoft. Not quite that long, but close enough. Looking at the middle here, and the left-hand side, we do recognize that our reality is going to be hybrid cloud for a long time to come. So we're moving now I believe we started out at about 500 virtual machines per month are moving from on-prem Hyper-V up into Azure IaaS. I don't know off the top of my head how many applications are going to PaaS every month. I suspect it's probably somewhere between 50 and 100 right now. New applications are being developed or applications are being modernized and moved. We have the ability now to move over 1,000 VMs off premises from Hyper-V to Azure a month. So the limitation is not any of those cloud enablement areas there or any of those work streams. It's just simply the inertia of getting them all scheduled and getting the downtime to be able to migrate. So it's not necessarily a technical limitation now that's slowing us down anymore. It's more of a scheduling issue that's keeping us from going faster. The middle part will continue to change as well. So with the announcement of the Azure system, again, I think we're going to see what's available in private cloud kind of flip over and mirror what we can do in public cloud. In terms of Microsoft IT's investments and our priorities, though, I don't believe we're going to continue to invest heavily in private cloud. So private cloud is only going to be there for the things that can't move to public. And I'll talk about what those percentages are going to be going into the future, but I believe that probably 3 to 5 years from now, we will definitely be over 80% in public cloud, probably closer to 90-95%. So I am an optimistic guy by nature, but I think everyone's going to be surprised with this latest wave of releases that are coming out from Microsoft and a lot of the partner things that are coming in and filling some of the gaps in how fast those blockers and inhibitors to going to public cloud are just going to fall away. So there's not going to be major technical limitations that keep us from going to public cloud anymore. We do have 2 very distinct approaches to cloud adoption. I'll talk about the top-down one first. This is really going after our application portfolio of things that are going to continue to have a long lifespan or things that are getting development investment today. So this is, again, to contrast it with the bottom one, it's a very systematic approach. So we look at the applications themselves in the portfolio, we look at their pattern of investment, we try to figure out how much is going to be necessary to actually modernize this application to either move it to SaaS or move it to PaaS. So this is very resource intensive. There's a very detailed assessment that goes into this. We look at the technical requirements, the business factors, and then ultimately the outcome of this is where should the application go? If everything lines up, does this application belong in SaaS or does it belong in PaaS? Or not. If neither one of those are achievable, maybe we go to IaaS or maybe we choose not to move it at all. I think that is going to be rare, but this is really the approach that we're taking for the things that, again, are strategic to Microsoft IT, strategic to Microsoft themselves, and that are going to get the level of investment to actually modernize and take maximum benefit of the cloud. Then we have the bottom-up approach. And this is less about dealing with the application portfolio itself, but dealing with the infrastructure investments that we've made historically and avoiding making those same infrastructure investments going forward. So this is a more tactical approach. This is looking at the hardware, the operating system, the network, and operational considerations and operational investments that we've already made, and then determining at the end, where can this workload go, right? If it's not going to be modernized, if I crawl up the stack from the bottom up instead of from the top down, can I go to IaaS? Yes, great. Can I push this to PaaS? If I can't, then I'm just going to go ahead and take this to IaaS with the intention, again, of making sure that, if we're not going to have the luxury of modernizing this application, I'm at least getting it off of the on-prem infrastructure that I don't want to continue to own and maintain going forward. So 2 different approaches, when used in conjunction and run by 2 different teams, seem to be very successful in getting us to the cloud. I won't tell you that either one of these things is very easy. Both are fairly straightforward. Both, take their own domains of knowledge and expertise. The bottom one is really being run by our infrastructure operations team. So they understand the data center, they understand what people are using today. The top one is really owned by our application engineering groups who know the code, they know the applications, they understand what can be done to actually modernize them and move them to a more evolved service model. So again, these 2 teams working together at a ground level are what is driving our internal line of business applications to our cloud services, public cloud services specifically. At the heart of this is the classification foundation. So we have business factors and we have technical factors. The now and the next really is an indication of readiness. Is it ready to go now? Or is it not ready to go now, and what is it going to take to get it there? So at the business factors, you have criticality, right? How important is this to the business, or what is the impact going to be if things go horribly wrong, right? Is this revenue generating? Does it relate to a product development and release function that if something goes wrong, we can't code, release, and ship product to you guys, our customers? Is it regulated? So do we have data sovereignty issues? Do we have legal and regulatory compliance things that we need to think about? And then the content, is it high impact or is it low impact? If you look at the technical factors, they're a little bit more mundane, right? Is it hybrid? Does it cross premises? Does part of it live in private? Does part of it live in public? Does it cross service models? That tends to add complexity that makes it a little bit tougher to move or can make it a little bit harder to support when you actually start to unwind it and move it to cloud. Commodity versus complex monitoring needs. We've made a lot of investments over the years and got pretty good at monitoring on-premises. A lot of the investments that we've made on-premises don't translate well to cloud, so we either have to make new investments, or sometimes we've actually made the conscious choice to just move things to the cloud and kind of cross our fingers and go without. So again, that's a technical factor leading to a business decision to, I won't say ignore, but at least continue to move to the cloud knowing what we're giving up. And then the last 2, custom app integration, of course. If you're dealing with something you don't own, you don't understand the code, it can be more difficult to support when you move it off of a well-known, very well-understood infrastructure. And then moderate versus large database sizes. So the last one there has been changing very, very rapidly. So when we first learned about this thing called SQL Azure, you were limited to 50 gig of database. Completely blown through that now. Now we have, pretty much, there's very few, I can probably count them on less than one hand, databases that we have in Microsoft IT that we couldn't host in Azure. It's not saying we're going to move them anytime soon. But again, just like virtual machines, now that we have the Godzilla VM, there's very few virtual machines running on premises right now that wouldn't fit in Azure. So if you characterize where we're at, okay, that didn't come back up. Apologize. There were actually sliders there that should have showed you where we're at with all 7 of these things. For the most part, with business factors, we tend to fall, either in the middle or toward the now. So there's definitely some things in terms of availability that until our applications are fully modernized and they can scale out and really take advantage of the availability schemes the cloud brings you, they're not going to fare well in a cloud environment right now that wasn't designed the same way the on-premise environment was for high availability. We bought servers that were designed to stay up 4 or 5 nines, networks and storage that were the same way. The hyperscale cloud is not designed that way. So to get high availability for your mission critical applications, you're going to have to change your application architecture. It's just the way that it is. Or you're going to have to adopt a different service model. Regulatory, again, pretty straightforward. There are some things right now that some of the regulatory bodies have issues with, or we don't have an Azure data center in every single country in the world yet. I'm joking. I don't know if we're going to get to every single country in the world, but we're getting pretty global at this point. We have India, China, Australia, Brazil now, in addition to major European, Asia, and North American locations. But again, a lot of these things are falling out, but there are still some legal and regulatory hurdles that we and customers have with getting into any multi-tenant cloud environment. Technical factors there. Cross-premises, I think we're doing pretty well there. We've built a brand new internet edge. We've built hybrid connectivity to connect our private cloud presence with our on-prem environments. Very, very robust. We've actually built 40 gig of connectivity into some of the North America Azure data centers, which is about the same level of connectivity that we built between our on-prem data centers. So a lot of these things, even though they were barriers or we were on the, next side 6 months, 12 months, 24 months ago, a lot of them are pushing to the now side. Again, very few technical barriers and even business barriers to getting to the public cloud now. It's just a matter of inertia at this point. We do have a very detailed assessment that we go through when we look at the application portfolio, though, and there's a lot of detail behind this. I'll point you to the IT Showcase website, but there's a very good set of documents that describe the process that we go through when we look at our application portfolio, and then decide what should go, when, and to what model. But to kind of get through this, we take a look at those things on the left-hand side. What is the workload? What does the architecture look like? What is the financial incentive to go there, risk, and then any operational security considerations. We push it through this framework. Then we decide on the right-hand side toward the top, what do we do with it? Do we replace it, move it to software as a service, commoditized again? Do we rebuild it to PaaS? Do we just simply move it from one on-prem to off-prem, rehost it in IaaS? Or do we tear it apart and we move pieces opportunistically? We're doing all 4 of these things simultaneously. It just depends on the application, where it's at in its life cycle, and what the outcome of the cloud assessment framework. Knowing that we really want to get to that red corner and get that strategic benefit with as little difficulty getting there as possible. We do have these kind of service work streams that live within this whole adoption effort. We have cloud analysis, and we have cloud guidance and architecture, and the last one is engagement and reporting. So we take a look at the cloud services themselves. What are their capabilities? What is the value proposition? Are there any gaps in terms of what we need as opposed to what the cloud provider offers. This is basically what is it going to take to get there? And if we can get there, what is it going to take for us to go faster? So the whole goal of this is to accelerate getting into the cloud. The guidance and architecture, again, was one of those key pieces we missed in the original strategy. How do I make it easy for people to get there? So not only fast, how do I simplify getting there? And then make sure it's a good experience when they are there. And the last one there, cloud engagement and reporting. This is really, this is why I'm here, essentially. What have we learned? What are the things that we did? How do we be the reference customer? How do we do it the right way? And if we didn't do it the right way, how do we expose the mistakes and the challenges we ran into to you guys so you get the benefit of even our negative experience? So, showcasing. And then when we do learn things, of course, we don't want to be the people that continue to touch the hot stove. We're going to learn from it. We've learned the stove's hot. We're not going to touch it again. We're going to change our behavior. We're going to change our approach. We have moved some very visible, very large, and very critical applications. We probably did it at a time where other enterprises wouldn't have done the same thing. So we're a little crazy, but it's for good reason in Microsoft IT. Part of our job is to actually evaluate, prove out, and exercise Microsoft's own products and services, and be that development partner with our own products and services teams, in addition to being a customer. So we consume this stuff from them the same way that you do. We're not doing anything with Azure or Hyper-V differently than you guys could. So there's no special magic that we get, no special dispensation that we get. We run the stuff earlier, sometimes more aggressively than external customers do. But the reason for that is to get the benefit of learning, expose where there are problems and challenges, and help our own products and services teams understand what it's going to take for an enterprise like Microsoft to run this stuff successfully. This happens to be our partner and customer-facing volume licensing portal. And there's a lot of back-end work that goes into this to actually enable Microsoft and our partners to sell software to customers. So this is revenue generating for Microsoft. This is revenue generating for partners. This application doesn't work. Microsoft doesn't make money, and our partners are furious with us. So we deconstructed this application, moved a lot of it to platform as a service, and became one of the largest hybrid applications that we have in our environment right now and up in Azure. So it's been there for a couple of years now. We definitely, ran into some issues with it, particularly early on. Great learning experience. So this is one of the flagship applications that we've actually moved up into Azure PaaS. There are others behind it, but increasingly, again, every application that we're developing new, both internally within Microsoft IT, but then a lot of the applications we're seeing in the businesses right now are furiously going to either platform as a service or they're going on to some of the finished services platforms like Office, like Dynamics, like Visual Studio Online. But again, it's not only small stuff that can go. I would encourage you to do the low-hanging fruit first. So in an enterprise, you probably have tons and tons of small departmental apps. Move those first. Don't kill yourself trying to move the hardest stuff first. It's not a good business decision. But eventually, when you get the learnings behind you and you get the experience behind you and people are comfortable, then you can go after the tough stuff. But the tough stuff is possible. There we go. So this will continue to change over time, but this is more of a snapshot in terms of if we had to say right now what our portfolio would look like in Microsoft Public Cloud Services, this is essentially what it would look like. We've moved, a lot of the applications right now, either in part or in total, to Azure PaaS. But if I had to pick up everything in the data center today and move it up into Azure, 70% of it, what we have today that hasn't already gone to PaaS and that we don't believe is going to be stuck to physical hardware or stuck to private cloud for the next 3 to 5 years, could go to Azure IaaS pretty quickly. Again, there's going to be a lot of inertia in getting it there, but it's absolutely possible today, and we categorize that as IaaS eligible. So that's not saying that they're actually going to move to Azure IaaS, but if we had to deprecate our on-prem data centers today and do an all hands on deck to move these things up into Azure today, it could be done. So there's nothing blocking these things from going to Azure IaaS today. The things that are going to remain behind. There are going to be infrastructure services that have to remain behind just because of their own nature, right? We still have people that are going to be working on Microsoft on-premises that need IP services like DHCP, DNS. We're going to need edge services. We're going to need security services. We're going to need some sort of component to be able to run the on-prem infrastructure, not necessarily on-prem applications, but on-prem infrastructure services. Those are going to still remain on-premises. There are some unique things that Microsoft IT, I'm sorry, not Microsoft IT does. Some things that IT does, but some things that groups in Microsoft do that have to remain on-prem, like the offline root CA that we use to sign software. It's going to be locked up. It actually is locked up in a vault somewhere. It's never turned on. We will have the capability to sign software in the cloud at some point, but that root certificate is going to stay on-prem. There's always going to be the small percentage that for whatever reason is going to stay outside of public cloud, maybe on private cloud, maybe on dedicated hardware. I'm not going to stress out about that. If I can get 97% of our portfolio into the cloud over the next 5 years, that is a huge win for everybody involved. One of the things that we've had struggled with in the past has been this tendency to focus on the exceptions. I'm not worried about the exceptions at this point. I want to understand them, and I want to make sure that we're doing something to try to resolve those exceptions. I want to at least log them and understand what the gap is. What is it going to take for me to get there? But I got my work cut out for me anyway. Everybody has their work cut out for them in terms of getting to the cloud. And as you can see, that adoption curve that we see there at the bottom is actually what we're driving toward now. It's a little small, but if you run this out from FY13, which is when we really started executing on the new strategy, out to FY20, which is 2019 now, 4 years from now, we're going to drive physical down to nearly zero, so it becomes a asymptotic line. There's going to be, a handful of machines in our environment that are still stuck back on physical. Private cloud goes to a minimal level. Most everything is going to be in public cloud, and for the most part, I think that this is actually going to reverse. Probably, if you look 3 years from now, 60 to 70% of our portfolio is going to be on PaaS, or going to be involved either partially or mostly on PaaS 3 years from now. There's going to be a significant amount of stuff that stays on IaaS and dies on IaaS. It's not going to get any investment. I'm okay with that. But again, the goal is to get to public cloud. The goal is to modernize our applications if possible, climb up the stack. But if things aren't going to get modernized, at least I avoid continuing to invest in legacy on-prem data centers. So, Cloud Infrastructure Fund. So I apologize for some of you guys that are application focused. I am an infrastructure guy. This is sprinkled a little bit in, but I'll talk a bit about what I'm dealing with in terms of the network right now. And I'm happy to talk with you about all kinds of other things. I have a very long and storied history in Microsoft IT. I've worked on most everything, but again, I happen to be focused on a lot of the challenges and issues we have around the network right now. Anybody recognize this gentleman? I'm sure some of you do. This is Henry Ford. So he's very famous for, I don't think he actually invented the assembly line, but he sure took great advantage of it. Mass manufacturing of automobiles here in the United States. He had a very famous quote or anecdote, depending upon who you believe, where he said if he would have asked his customers what they wanted before he decided to create the Model A and the Model T, they would have, what do you want to be more efficient transportation? They would have said a faster horse rather than an automobile. They had no concept of what an automobile was and what value it offered. And there were actually studies when he kind of made fun at that academics went out and tried to prove that breeding better horses was a better investment than automobiles. Not only have our customers kind of suffered from that mentality, but also in IT we've suffered from that mentality as well. We see everything within the lens we're familiar with and what we're comfortable with. And moving to the cloud and a lot of the industry pressures that we're under right now are challenging those and actually breaking those, and I'm not sad about that at all. I enjoy the innovation. I enjoy the disruption. Not everybody in IT does. Not everybody does, period. It's human nature to stick in your comfort area and kind of see things through the lenses you're familiar with. But again, Henry Ford kind of broke the mold. I think cloud and a lot of the industry pressures right now are breaking that same mold. These are the enterprise IT architecture influences the way that I see them. Across the top, we have the big industry trends right now: cloud, big data, transitioning over from big data to business insights. Data's no good if you don't know what to do with it. You can't make any sense of it. Mobile and social. Down here at the bottom are really the things that I think are shaping up how we invest around those big four mega trends. So we have the business pressures, of course, right? We've got to move faster. We've got to deliver quicker. Right now, since Microsoft is now a services company and we're continuously developing and continuously releasing, we can't slow them down. If we slow them down, we're dead meat. They're going to go around us. We also need to, not only increase our speed, but we have to do it with lower complexity and lower cost, or else we can't compete. A lot of the cloud providers right now are in a race to drive down not only their own cost, but drive down the cost of the customers. We're competing in areas we've never competed before. While we're doing this, we're also trying to provide a quality of service, enable new emerging markets, and then support outsourcing and partnerships as well. At the bottom, cyber threats. They're more real than ever. So I don't know of another company that's probably a bigger target than a private company than Microsoft. Everybody likes to try to hack Microsoft. We're a great target. We now that we're not only selling direct to customers, we also have a bunch of partners. We need to make sure that we protect our own assets, but we also protect your assets as well, because we have some of your assets. Now that we own cloud services, your assets run on our infrastructure, and we have to protect you by proxy. So we're making a lot of investments there. Encryption at Flyte and in RESC. We're trying to limit the admin models. Jeff Woolsey talked about RBAC, role-based access control. We actually have role-based access control even internally on our internal infrastructure. So one of the problems that not only external customers have had with our cloud services, but even Microsoft IT has had with another arm of Microsoft, is we treat them like another company. They don't trust us. We don't trust them. So we don't want their admins getting into our stuff and vice versa. So they've had to demonstrate to us, like they've had to demonstrate to you, that if they really wanted to, they could get into things in the back end. But there are plenty of protections there that doesn't happen under normal circumstances and won't happen under normal circumstances. But we not only want to protect ourselves again, we also want to protect you guys as well. Modern devices, again, big challenge. We want to be able to enable people to use whatever device they want to, from wherever they want to, whatever time they want to. So the days of coming into the office, my history of Microsoft has never been 9 to 5. But very few, companies that use technology in the way that we all use technology are, fixed business hours. Our customers, even if we can work fixed business hours, our customers won't. So we have to be able to support, heterogeneity in the devices. We have to support broad network access. We have to support, services that are always on, always online, always available. And the last one there is there are definite network ecosystem challenges in our environment. So that 1 million servers that they talked about in the keynote, we have to address them on the back end side. I don't have 1 million IP addresses left in the IPv4 space. So everybody's been, talking about the skies falling in terms of IPv4 address depletion. We ran out of IPv4 addresses inside Microsoft a couple years ago. So we've been using RFC 1918 space for many, many years. but we're out. So we're building so much infrastructure inside of Microsoft, and there's so many devices in our ecosystem that we can't address them with IPv4. So we're driving very, very quickly to IPv6, but it's going to take us a while to get there. But in the meantime, we're having to do some very creative things around virtualizing our internal networks the same way we virtualize the customer address spaces in the multi-tenant services. To kind of close this one out again, historically I think we've relied on the network to enforce a lot of access control and enforce a lot of security policy. That's quickly, coming unwound when we're virtualizing the network and kind of abstracting the network away from, or network services away from the physicality of the environment. So we've relied on topology, known topology, and being able to draw a line between source and destination for many, many years and putting some kind of control in the middle, firewall and ACL, access control list. When I'm virtualized, or it's not even my network that I'm traversing anymore, I can't do that. So we're having to think of new ways to deal with that. And the last one there is service level rationalization or standardization. So, we used to own the network. It was ours. I knew what devices were there. I knew what size links were there. I knew what quality of service queues were out there. Now, the majority of the network that my customers use on a daily basis is not my own. So it's some kind of virtualized network that the provider gives to them, or I have some kind of virtualized overlay that connects my on-prem environment to their cloud environment. So dealing with all these things in terms of giving them a quality of service they need is, early on, it was not possible. Now that we have some more evolved services, it is possible, but it's definitely different than what we've done in the past. This is a diagram that I drew 3 years ago that scared the pants off of a bunch of our security people and networking folks. It was very, very simple to understand, but I think a lot of people didn't realize what was happening. So when we really started going to Azure and going to Office 365 and supporting some of these modern concepts around people can use whatever device they want to, they can work from wherever they want to, I'm not going to impede your productivity. I saw tons and tons of people with their laptops here, even Microsoft folks doing their work from Chicago. Most of what's going on today, if you're not in a Microsoft physical facility, is happening at the top, outside of my firewall, outside of my network edge. I don't see that traffic anymore. I can't guarantee quality service on that traffic anymore. I may not even know what people are bringing up in these environments anymore. And I'm furiously moving the applications and business functions that my people rely on, even if they are on premises, out into this public cloud environment. I asked people, when I drew this diagram, how many edges they thought we had. And they were like, well, we have the internet edge and we have the DMZ, or the extranet edge. Is that enough? I counted, I think the first time that I drew this, I counted 9 edges, including edges that we had no control over. Some of those far edges up in the internet-facing endpoints and some of the public cloud services that we didn't control. Somebody put an application up there, they put data out there, they exposed it to the internet, we had no knowledge of it, no control over it. So we didn't control the ACL, we didn't control any kind of firewall rules, and sometimes we even had no idea what kind of security they put on these. So that's changed. So in the past 3 years, now we have all of these Microsoft IT properties and applications tied to the Azure Active Directory, so we have those controls now. We have resource groups and templates that you saw in some of the demonstrations where now we have more consistency around deploying these applications so people can't make mistakes and accidentally expose things to the internet. We have applications that understand things like data leakage protection. We actually have dedicated hybrid connectivity between on-premises and cloud that allows me to extend my private networks up into Azure and keep it looking like an intranet. When I first drew this diagram and asked people these questions, we had none of that. But we were still going to the public cloud. We were just going to the public cloud, not understanding the implications of it, not understanding the amount of risk that we were creating in doing this, not only from a service level perspective, but also from a security perspective. But, this is This is the way that it was from a high-level concept a few years ago. It's already changing. So this is more, this still isn't super pretty, but this is what it looks like today. So we've actually rationalized some of these edges and actually created intentional services around being able to get from on-premises to public cloud services, to the wide open, scary internet, but also to get to private services up in Azure. So if I have applications that are not going to be modernized, that are not going to be changed to manage their own access, that are not going to utilize some of the more evolved methods of client and high-end hybrid application connectivity, they're going to move to Azure and behave just as they were on premises. I can move them up into Azure with this private connectivity in the middle and do it securely, basically make them part of our own intranet and protect them with the same types of controls that I built in the on-prem data centers. Again, it pains me to do that a little bit because I'd like to see them modernized, but I'm okay with it in the short term to just simply get out of making legacy investments. But if you look at this from left to right, from an office building, from bottom to top, left to right, if you're in an office building or a campus and you want to get to the internet, the wide open internet, I'm going to put you through a full gauntlet of security, right? Firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention, data leakage protection. I'm going to look at, I'm going to grab all kinds of logs to figure out what you're accessing and what you're pulling back through into my own internal environment. Does stuff still get through? Of course. And that's why we're building a lot of the things into the platform to be able to catch this with anti-malware and a lot of the protections you saw to make sure that, we're not bringing malware back into the environment, because once you get in, there's not a lot protecting you from moving horizontally, unfortunately, yet today. In the middle, we have that private connectivity into an Azure virtual network, basically making Azure look like an extension of our on-prem data center. To us, it just looks like a remote data center. And then on the right-hand side, we have the hybrid edge that allows us not only to get to Azure public networks. So if we have hybrid applications that span an on-prem data center and public cloud, either on IaaS or PaaS, I can create private connectivity between the two. So I can have a traditional, kind of legacy application that can't protect itself back on premises, connecting securely to one that either is modernized or not modernized up into Azure, and get full site-to-site connectivity and not have to worry about the security exposure. But I also have a scoped internet edge to trusted services up in public cloud. So if I decide that I trust the Azure address space, I trust the Office 365 space, I trust the Visual Studio space from my on-prem data centers, I can create that internet peering to the internet and allow those on-prem servers to talk to those trusted cloud services in a way that limits their exposure by scoping it down to those services. Inherently, that's still problematic for us because by nature, those are still multi-tenant services. So it could be a Microsoft property, it could be somebody else, but it's better than just simply leaving them open to the entirety of the internet. That's something that we need to address going into the future. We don't have a great solution for it right now. Whitelisting against individualized IPs or even address ranges that are published for each Azure region is kind of painful and it can be very fragile. We do that right now, but it's not something that I think is sustainable at scale. So we're going to have to come up with a better solution. This is a permutation that we put into place to start to address some of the issues we're having with exposing internet-facing services to our clients while still maintaining wide open site-to-site connectivity back to on-prem. So this is a problem that we're having right now because we're modernizing parts of applications, but not the entirety of the application. So we have very strict rules against dual homing machines between the internet and our intranet. It's perfect path for intrusion. It's happened before. If we were to do that without the proper controls, it would happen again, of course. So what we've done now is we've actually taken the corporate data centers, which are basically our intranet data centers. We've taken our DMZ data centers, which I call the extranet up there. We have an on-prem firewall that controls the access between those two to make sure that we're not allowing people to intrude from the internet to our intranet. We're mimicking a lot of those controls when we move them up into Azure. So one of the challenges we ran into with moving our legacy population up into Azure was we couldn't, not only could we not refactor and modernize the entirety of the application, we really couldn't do that much to reconfigure them. So we could only do very slight reconfiguration to them. So we could change the way that their virtual NICs were laid out. We could take things like, remove static routes, things like that were no longer necessary because these things really aren't truly dual-homed. But we couldn't fundamentally go in and say, I'm going to move you Active Directory domains. All the authentication would break. I can't fundamentally change your network access patterns because your application doesn't know how to protect itself. So we had to carry a lot of the security baggage with us and operational baggage with us up into the Azure IaaS environment. We came up with a solution where we could mimic those network zones up into Azure and then utilize ExpressRoute and virtual networking to mimic the security controls between them. So now we have the ability to apply network security groups. Underneath those network security groups, we have subnet ACLs and virtual network ACLs. We also have the ability to, because we're using virtual circuits with ExpressRoute, we can bring that traffic all the way down to our customer provider edge and send it to other devices. Like we can send it to a DLP device. We can send it to a more involved intrusion prevention device. We can actually even grab it and do NetFlow inspection on it. So we came up with and I'm happy to share some of the details. We're in the process of writing a white paper on this. But we came up with a solution that I characterize it as an interim solution. So the ecosystem around virtualized network and security appliances is really just getting going. So there are some next generation firewalls and some application firewalls that are out there in the Azure Gallery today. That is going to blossom here in the next 6 to 12 months. So the requirement to actually bring your own devices to the Azure Colo and connect them in the way that we did. If I had to do it all over again, if we weren't pushed to do this, 6 months ago or doing it right now, I wouldn't make the same investment choices. I would change what we've done. But again, we did this for good reason because we had to move at the time we did, and it was a good business decision and a technical direction that I was willing to undertake in the name of getting to public cloud faster and avoiding those legacy investments. But again, if you guys can get the benefit of our own experience and the instruction that we've given our own product teams and our own partners on how to essentially do cloud right, you won't have to repeat exactly the same investment pattern that we've made. So basically, what we've done is we've actually taken the entirety of our on-prem data center security stamp and moved it close to Azure, is what we had to do to satisfy our own security needs. With that said, here's where I believe we're going in the future. So all the crazy stuff that we had to do with managing topology and being concerned with source and destination in the past, and all the complexity that we've created over the past 20 years in our network, I'm going to try to flatten out. So again, this is a very high-level conceptual diagram that I've created, but it maps to where I believe the distinguished engineers in cloud and enterprise believe that enterprises are going to go in the future. So kind of a busy diagram, but essentially what I want to do is I want to flatten the on-prem networks down and just create a single enterprise access network. Whether you're coming in on wired or wireless or remote, you're going to get the same experience. You're going to get the same policy applied to you, and you're going to be pushed into this enterprise transport network if you need to get to enterprise services on the right-hand side. So there's still going to be some stuff that remains in the wheelhouse of IT that we're going to have to provide around authorization, connectivity, identity, some of the fundamental things there. We may source them from a cloud provider, but we're still going to have to kind of own them and own how they're presented to our customer base. And there's still going to be some standards that we're going to provide around them. If there are things that still remain on premises, data centers, labs, and then services points of presence, I'll be able to leverage those enterprise services from on-prem. I'll also be able to emit those enterprise services out toward the public cloud as well. So if people need to come to me to leverage our Active Directory tenancy, they'll be able to get it from that enterprise services layer. It's just a box there that doesn't actually live anywhere. It's in the cloud. I don't know where it is. But I can get to it from up at top. I can get to it from down to bottom. If if you hit our enterprise transport layer based upon your destination, it can be a partner location, a remote office, a home office, any cloud service. It can be the internet even. I'm going to send you to a service block in the middle. So you can get onto our network any way you want to, but then depending upon where you're going, then I make a decision on what service I push you through. What kind of gauntlet I push you through. Do I push you through a channel of pain, or do I just let you go to the internet and say, have a nice day, have fun? This will create, and I hate the term that people use, a flexible and fungible network service environment right now that doesn't attach devices or services to any single purpose that will create the problem we've created in the past, where we create a specialized service and then we find out that it doesn't meet 100% of the needs, so we create a new one and we keep bolting on. I will create an infrastructure that I can land virtualized services on anywhere I want them to, and depending upon where you're coming from and where you're going, I just send you to the nearest service point of presence and you go wherever you're going to go to. And if we need to change the policy, I change the policy in one single location and it flows down all these services points of presence. This is kind of the conceptual diagram that will lead us to software-defined networking in an enterprise. I know what the reason for it is, why I want to do it. What I lack right now is how exactly I'm going to do it. Right? I know why I want to do it. I want to know what I want to do. I don't understand the how yet because not all of this technology is there, or there's a lot of digging that we need to do to flesh this out. So this is going to be my fun over the next few months to actually start to get us get a proof of concept and a pilot up and running. The sad part of this is there's not going to be a clean path to getting this. This is going to be a situation where I'm going to have to build a new network environment, and I'm going to have to migrate people from the old one to the new one. There's not a clean evolution to this. So again, cloud and all the megatrends are very disruptive. I'm going to introduce some disruption myself, but it's going to be for good reason. And it's going to put us in a situation where in a few years, we're going to have a network that is not going to be an impediment to achieving any of the things that we need to achieve in the cloud. One of the other things we realized, too, was when we started looking at the guidance that was being given to the application folks and even the services folks was, we had a lot of people that were developing for what we call the traditional way, as opposed to the cloud or modern way. But they really didn't realize what they were doing. So they had grown up in a data center environment with a very well-connected LAN, high speed, very little loss, low latency. They were used to scaling up their services to get better availability. They were used to a lot of infrastructure magic to give them the service levels and availability they needed. You're not going to get that in commoditized public cloud services. You're going to have to change the way your applications behave. So we came up with this contrast that showed you the difference between the traditional way and the cloud way. The cloud way, or the modern way, is at the base of the design principles that the application people are using today. So if you design for this cloud modern way today, regardless of whether you're going to the cloud or not, there's no downside to doing it. It's only going to be of benefit to you when you are ready to go to the cloud. So even if you're staying behind on-premises now, we're encouraging you to go to the cloud. Go to the cloud in the modern way today. This link here gives you a page that our patterns and practices teams put together. This is absolute gold. What they've done is they've actually taken a lot of this guidance that we've created and learnings that we've had internally in Microsoft and translated it into common application patterns for different industries. I believe last time I counted, they had something like between 40 and 50 application patterns out there to say if you're going to land this particular pattern, so you have an ordering application or you have a travel app or something. If you're leveraging Azure or Office 365, here's how you'd create this service. So I'd highly encourage you to go out and look at this link. It is learning that not only we've created, but also external customers have created in our pattern. And again, our patterns and practices team have documented it with diagrams and guidance and pointers to tools to be able to be more successful with these particular application patterns. Very, very useful information. So I'll go through this pretty quickly. In looking at our opportunities and realizations, again, moving to the cloud is both a business and technical decision. You're not going to win with one over the other necessarily. Just because the technology is cool doesn't mean the business is ready. Just because the business is ready doesn't mean the technology is going to support what they want to do. One size doesn't fit all, right? We thought early on most everybody's going to go to PaaS and everything's going to be cool. Doesn't work that way. Take advantage of the opportunity to redesign when you can. If you can't, it may be okay for you to go to IaaS. Look at all of your environments for cost savings. Some people mistakenly made the assumption that early on, only dev test was going to go or only production was going to go. We're looking across the board. And the last one there is IT personnel need to adapt to the rules and grow their skills relevant to cloud. A lot of the things we're doing today are moving away from enterprise IT. They're moving into the provider. Some may go away completely. It's just the way that it's going to be. But identifying the skills that are necessary for the cloud is going to be important. And this is something that we came up with. And there are actually a couple recommended links in here that try to translate what we call commoditized skills or old IT skills over to strategic skills for the new era. Recognizing that automation and getting rid of old investments, they're going to free up some resources. Whether those resources can evolve to the new skills remain to be seen. Of course, some of the people are going to come along. All of them may not. That's just the way it's going to be. And then look for pioneers. So people that are willing to get out there and learn these new skills, prove them out, and actually train up the next generation of people to come. These are the people that are going to help you evolve the IT pro skill set. The core functions of IT, I think, are changing as well. So as we had the traditional app way and the modern app way as well, thinking about the IT functions in these two ways is also something that we're well aware of. So think of traditional way as the old IT department of no, right? The business came to you, and if it didn't fit what you wanted, you automatically said no and go away. What we found is that doesn't work now. The business can go around you. And they will go around you. So we're changing the way that we behave toward our business and going more to this modern way where we accept that decentralized administration now. We accept that we're not going to be able to control everybody going to these environments. We need to verify them on the back end. We know that they want more granular service levels and support agreements, and they want the ability to use their own standards if they're not a danger to themselves and others. So we're more accepting of that. We're also redefining our IT operations. So I know I'm a little bit over time here, but I'll finish this out very quickly. One of the things that we were asked to do a few years ago was look at what we were doing as IT, look at our service portfolio, and start to decide, well, what does IT really need to do in the future, and what are the things that we can abdicate? Naturally, we went to our current portfolio and started to pick apart the 2,500 different things that we did. We took a fresh approach and just said, let's scrap everything that we do today and start from ground zero and decide what we really need to do. What are the vital few? And we came up with these 5 things in the middle that really are, critical things that an IT enterprise needs to do for the business. But if IT is not offering any value, we're just going to get out of the way and let them go to the cloud provider, and we're going to have to deal with it. So if we introduce any friction in the middle that the business gets no value out of, we're doing the wrong thing. And that's a complete mind shift, and something that I think a lot of people are having cultural issues with. So I'll go through this very quickly. We talked about the fundamental cloud challenges that we're having now around connectivity, the inertia of IT, just simply getting them moving, and moving at speed to be able to get to the cloud in a time frame that you can eliminate your legacy investments, the security and compliance challenges. Technical debt and inefficiency is pretty straightforward. We were so big and had been around for so long that people had forgotten, everything we were doing. There was a lot of tribal knowledge. Things weren't documented well. When we actually started going through and grooming the portfolio and figuring out what we did, people had come and gone, and we had to kind of go through a rediscovery process, and that slowed us down a bit. We do have some new challenges. So we have the culture and human nature issue, right? People are afraid of the unknown. They're unwilling to change. They don't want to be the first ones. They have all or nothing attitudes, and some of them are just afraid of change, or they don't see themselves in this future. We have the existing investment and resourcing patterns. People are unwilling to give up investments they haven't fully realized yet, but there may need to be some forcing functions there. Business motivations and priorities, of course. Not everybody gets the same level of benefit out of cloud. There is a level of investment you have to make just to get there. So understanding that and being okay with it or not, and changing your prioritization is just a reality. And then the technology differences and capability gaps. So we had a lot of people, again, that were looking for commonality with the cloud, and you're not going to find it in all cases. So you have to learn how to do things differently. Or you have to look very hard and decide whether you really need to do that at all going forward. Don't just assume you're going to pick up what you're doing today and just move into the cloud and it's going to work fantastically. Again, we're making it easier to get there, but it may not make the best business sense. Unfortunately, I made you guys miss Brian Harry's presentation because it conflicted with this one, but I'd highly encourage you to go take a look at the DevOps presentation that he just did. There's a lot of other ones here that are related to this subject. I think Ganesh is going to do a great one here on Azure networking coming up, and then all the other ones that are really related to kind of this subject around Azure operations, network and data center infrastructure. I mentioned virtual appliances here that will get you out of some of the mess that we've made knowingly with our own network. And then, Dave Chappell, Dave Chappell, I'm sorry, not Dave Chappell, is going to do the Microsoft Azure for Enterprises what and why. So kind of build on this with less of a Microsoft IT bent. And then there are more IT Showcase track sessions. You just attended the first one, which was me, but there are going to be more coming up in terms of what we're doing with SharePoint, what we're doing with Windows 10, social, and then how we manage our IT identities, the Azure Active Directory piece, multi-factor auth, all the way through Friday. There are theater sessions as well. I'm going to be doing one on Wednesday, but there's a whole bunch of them in here related to what we do in Microsoft. I'm going to talk a little bit about more of the detail about what we do on around the cloud networking on Wednesday. And then I would highly encourage you to go out to the IT Showcase website. So a lot of the things that I talk about, a lot of the things we do in IT are reflected on the IT Showcase website. You're going to find a lot of white papers, case studies. You'll also find a course that we offer on various different subjects. So cloud, SharePoint, Link. We have 2 or 3 day courses out there that you or your account team can sign up for and come in and do deep dives and question and answers with subject matter experts on these subjects. You can also request custom engagements, or your account team can request custom engagements. And the last thing I'll leave you with is we do have some resources for IT decision makers. So these are related to that patterns and practices that I talked about before. Around these, you'll see the link out there, aka.ms, which is our URL shortening service, cloud architecture. So I can stick around if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, I can talk to you offline. Not too hard to find, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to stick around. I'd ask you to please come to the mic so we can capture it on video and audio. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. Sir?
Yeah, thanks for a good session, by the way. Thank you very much.
You.
I have a question. On 2 slides ago, you were talking about the adaptation to your employees. How do you think you can do that better for a company who's moving to the cloud? Because you've been doing a lot of technically and then go to the cloud and see adoption going really slow. And I'm actually very curious how you can do that faster by looking at your employees also.
The question was around, given the challenges we face in getting to the cloud, how could we make investments to accelerate our adoption? Yeah. How can we go faster? What are the key things that we actually learned where we did not make good investments to actually accelerate our adoption or actually even allow people to get to the cloud? Mm-hmm. I think those 4 fundamental enablers, not recognizing that we needed to have the right amount and type of connectivity there, that we had to at least understand the security challenges in going there and make sure that we acknowledge the risk, and if at all possible, mitigated the risk, making the right investments in identity, and then also making sure that we had the proper manageability to get there, I think were fundamental enablers to allow us to go. Mm-hmm. I think the other things that we needed to do was we needed to reward, or I don't even want to say incent. We had to make the investments necessary. We had to give people the time, the resources, money, people, time. We had to deprioritize the other stuff that was really rooted in legacy IT and prioritize the stuff that is helping us modernize IT and get to cloud, yeah. To get people out of the daily churn to get them reoriented to moving to the cloud. So, we're like any other IT organization where if you look at, historically what we've done, we were 80% run, 20% innovate on a good day. The industry standard we've seen is 80-20 or 70-30. So we have to flip that and start to orient people more toward building for the future rather than just simply running what we have today.
And by listening to the people also.
Excuse me?
And by listening to them also, by talking to them and what
talking
they want.
Third part of that really is, getting them to see themselves in the future so that they not only want to work on this and want to push us to the cloud. The worst thing that you can do is have somebody not see themselves in this future and actually become an impediment to trying to get to the cloud, right? They will resist and they will, I wouldn't say sabotage, but they can definitely slow you down because, we have the same type of environment where everybody, anybody can say no, right? And stop you cold or slow you down. So getting people to see themselves in that future and help you build toward it rather than either be passive or actively resist, I think is important.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sir? One more question. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
In your flattened network infrastructure design that you had up there on that one slide, are you using technologies to authenticate the end device, or are you focused more on the end user in terms of like a two-factor or something?
Yep. So the question is, in looking at the future network architecture, are we doing anything to authenticate the end devices or the endpoints rather than controlling the traffic between the endpoints? That is going to be a key part of our strategy going forward. So I want to make the network itself pretty passive and start to push the security and control to the endpoints, including making data self-protecting on the resource side, but also make the clients more responsible for their own security posture. How that manifests, I'm not sure yet. I haven't defined that how. But access control, fingerprinting of devices, captive portals, I think everything is on the table at this point. The things that I think I don't want to invest in are going to be things that continue to make us build into specific topologies or that limit people's mobility, because those will be productivity killers. And those will bring the same or even a new level of complexity right back to the network space that I don't want. So we've looked at things like 802.1x and on the wired side, which we use it today on the wireless side. I really don't want to go that route. So the future in that area is not written. I get to write it. All right, and I need some help from some other people in writing it. Sorry. Thanks, you guys.
So I got one quick one. Well, hope it's quick. As you know, Azure, they're deploying new feature sets almost every day. Something goes into preview mode. When did you, or how did you decide that, okay, then we're moving these apps, and even though there's a ton of cool stuff I know that's going to get released next week, when did you draw the line and say, this is what it's going to be? Yep. Otherwise, you get caught in that cycle, well, I'll wait till tomorrow because I know something else is going to come out to make it even better.
Yep. So the question essentially is, how do we decide when we're going to go and we're not going to go and which features we're going to take versus waiting? We sometimes will adopt things in preview mode and just go with them, even in production. It all depends on how much risk we're going to take and a subjective assessment of the maturity of the feature that's coming out. So I don't think there's any one single answer that we give. We will take more risk than other customers will in adopting and deploying on preview features. But we also can't afford to wait. So you saw in that interim network diagram there that I actually did some things that, again, if I had to do it all over again today, I wouldn't make the same level of investments, but it made sense at the time. It allowed us to continue to move forward. I think we're going to see that pattern. It's the whole grass is greener on the other side. Right. Am I going to wait for, am I going to continue to wait? I'll be waiting forever for the next better new thing. So you have to make a decision on when it's the right time for you to move. And we move when we see the technology and the level of service at a point that it's good enough.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.